Okay guys, this is the video for photosynthesis and climate change, of which we talked in class today. So first thing we need to talk about is the greenhouse effect. And I asked students in class what they already knew about it, and here's sort of what they reported. They knew that it involved carbon dioxide, that some of it was good for plants, and that too much of it might be related to pollution or climate change or something like that. They thought it might have something to do with the ozone layer, and overall that it made the planet warmer, of which they were pretty good, I think. Okay, so the greenhouse effect is caused by greenhouse gases, of which there are several. But including one that we talked the most about is carbon dioxide. And that's going to be the focus of our talk today because carbon dioxide is the first reactant in photosynthesis. Greenhouse gases are trapped in our atmosphere. An atmosphere is the sort of band of gases that surround a planet. That's how we're going to talk about them for now. Of course, we get energy from the sun. That energy is in the form of electromagnetic radiation. We receive both heat and light and different types of waves. So we see radio waves from the sun, we get UV rays from the sun, and etc. Because we have an atmosphere of greenhouse gases are able to absorb and trap sort of heat and light in them, and therefore they're able to heat up the Earth. The Earth, on average, is about 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Without our atmosphere, it would only be about 0 degrees Fahrenheit, which is not nearly hot enough for most things to survive at. Greenhouse gases don't trap everything perfectly. Some of it's going to escape back into the atmosphere, and that is a good thing. That keeps the Earth in what's called a Goldilocks zone. So if we think about, the Goldilocks zone refers to how far away the Earth is from the sun. But if we're just thinking about the Earth in general and our ability to keep our temperature stable so that it's not too hot during the day and it's not too cold at night, then we have kind of the atmosphere to thank for this. Other planets on either side of this include, this here is Venus. And Venus, they have a runaway greenhouse gas effect. And therefore, let's see, I had to save it over here. Venus is about 461 degrees Celsius. Now I know that doesn't mean anything to us, so we'll type it in and get, it's about 860 degrees Fahrenheit. That is too hot for us to survive at. It's hot enough to melt lead, which is pretty crazy. Venus has a lot of greenhouse gases and therefore is able to trap a lot more heat. Now, if we look at Mars, which has less of an atmosphere while also being further away from the sun, and it's about negative 46 degrees Celsius, so about negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit, which means that you wouldn't necessarily die in those temperatures. It's not like an automatic freezing, but it'd be real uncomfortable and you would not be able to live there. And neither would the majority, actually any of the plants I can think of. Okay? So neither of those things are good. We really appreciate our atmosphere. All right. Now we're going to watch a short video by Bill Nye. It's about 5 minutes long.
We hear it so much that it feels like a buzzword, but it is far from it. Climate change is a real and serious issue. But isn't the climate always changing? What exactly is climate change? Why should we care? Well, the Earth's climate has changed throughout history. Most of these slight changes are caused by small variations in the Earth's orbit. But climate change as we know it today is characterized by an abrupt increase in the Earth's temperature. It is estimated to have gotten 1.2 to 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit warmer in just the last century. 10 out of the last 13 years were the warmest on record. 97% of climate scientists agree that this new tendency is not caused by the variations in the Earth's orbit, but rather very likely caused by human activities. That means you, me. And since the Industrial Revolution, we have come a long way. Humans built airplanes, faster cars, developed remarkable technology, and learned how the natural resources around us can be used for our benefit. Although this has led to many wonderful inventions and advancements, like the device you're using to watch this video, or the ability to take a plane halfway around the world, it also means we've increased our consumption of natural resources and, in turn, released a lot of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Now, greenhouse gases occur naturally, but in excess can be dangerous to our planet. countries have increased the release of non-naturally occurring greenhouse gases because we have stepped up our demand for burning fossil fuels. The composition of greenhouse gases traps heat radiated from the sun. The more heat they trap, the warmer our planet gets. And as our planet gets warmer, we begin to feel the effects. One of climate change's biggest victims is our oceans. Oceans regulate the Earth's temperature and provide 50% of the Earth's oxygen. The climate change has increased the global temperature of the oceans by more than 0.3 degrees Fahrenheit since 1969. Although a warmer ocean might seem inviting to a beachgoer, it actually has devastating consequences for supporting life at sea. One of those consequences is ocean acidification, a direct effect of increased dissolved CO2. Since the late 18th century, ocean surface acidification has increased by 30%. A higher acid content means calcifying species, like oysters, clams, shallow water corals, are at risk, putting the entire ocean food web at risk. This is bad news for the 1 billion people relying on the ocean as its primary source of protein. Climate change has also caused the sea level to rise. Just in the last century, sea levels have risen 6.7 inches, but the rate in the last decade has nearly doubled. Sea levels have risen because as the ocean gets warmer, it swells. On top of that, glaciers and ice sheets are melting. Antarctica lost 36 cubic miles of ice between 2002 and 2005, and since 1994, each year on average, the Earth has lost 400 billion tons from its glaciers. That's like an ice cube 7.5 kilometers on the side, 4 miles on the side, melting and flowing into the sea. When all that ice melts, it fills up our oceans, and just like filling up a bathtub, the shores can't hold all that water, and coastal regions get flooded. Troubling signs of climate change are increased extreme weather events. Natural disasters like floods, tornadoes, and deadly heat waves are more obvious to humans because of their immediate impact and their sharing of the images in the media. Climate change, as we know it today, is change in our Earth's overall temperature with massive and permanent ramifications. Although its consequences can be planet-threatening, scientists still believe there are things we can do on a personal level to help.
Okay, so a couple things to talk about is how climate change is going to affect photosynthesis. So first of all, as was said in the video, climate change is caused by increased carbon dioxide emissions into the atmosphere. There are, of course, other greenhouse gases that are being emitted, but the big idea is that carbon is a cycle where things put carbon into the atmosphere and things take carbon outside of the atmosphere. And when you put too much in without taking enough out, then that's very, very bad. So we've increased carbon dioxide levels, which for animals is not excellent, but for plants is actually pretty good. Because as we all remember, carbon dioxide is the main reactant in photosynthesis. CO2 plus H2O make glucose and oxygen, people. So increased CO2 is actually pretty decent for plants. And so one of the hypotheses about climate change is the idea that plants are going to increase photosynthetic output, which means they're going to do more photosynthesis. They're going to grow bigger. They're going to store more food. Next, we have an increase in temperature. This kind of depends on if it's good for the plant, where it lives, and how well adapted it is to that environment. An increased temperature would be bad if you live in a very kind of cooler climate and you're used to that. That's not good. But it might be okay for some desert plants or even some plants in the rainforest that are already sort of used to increased temperatures and probably have different adaptations, just like different traits to get along with that. We have an increased growing season. So if you ever planted a garden, then you know winter is not the time to do it because it could frost over and kill your seeds. Increased growing season just means that it's later in the year before you have that frost. And so you get a longer time for planting. So that's also pretty good. This one isn't so good for plants. Precipitation changes in the amount of rain or snow that fall. Because it's not just one way or the other, it's an increase in extreme situations. So places that have droughts, if we're thinking of the US, we're thinking of maybe like the West Coast, California, or maybe the Midwest, like Oklahoma, Nebraska kind of region. Then we're talking about an increase in drought in those places. So dry places get drier. And the places that flood continue to flood and flood worse. So we're thinking about the coastline and also places in the southeast, like Arkansas, for instance, having more flooding than normal. You would change in flowering and migration times. So different animals migrate, things like butterflies, geese, pretty common, bats. And those migrations are sort of in sync with different plants, sort of growing and flourishing, so that when the animals get to wherever they're migrating to, they have a whole bunch of food ready for them. And the different plants flower in time for animals to take their seeds and spread them around. Yay for that. So if we have a change in those two things together, then the flowers and the plants don't get spread around, and the animals do not get food after flying for very long times. So that's no good. We also see an increase in both strength and frequency of hurricanes. So that's not great for plants. And then finally, we have a sea level rise of 1 to 8 feet, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually a pretty big deal when you're talking about just levels of water flooding, which is enough to flood coastal cities. Globally, about 40% of the human population lives in a coastal city, a city alongside an ocean. And so that is not good. We can't just move those cities either. There's sort of a reason we built them there, even if you could convince everyone in that city to move, in which case most people are unlikely to do so. All right. And thus ends the climate change and photosynthesis. Make sure you do the Go formative on this topic. The graphs really help out.